What's going on YouTube? It is Angus coming at you with this new video, and in today's video I'm going to be touching on the top 10 most frequently asked questions in the weight loss and fat loss world. And seriously, like, for me to even basically be certain that these are the most frequently asked questions, I legit spent about an hour literally searching in exactly that and just taking note of all the sort of dumb questions that people are asking, and then finding the average of all those questions and then basically putting together 10. Right? So I'm literally going to be covering the 10 most frequently asked questions in the fat loss and weight loss world. Going to be giving the answers to them one by one, and understand that this isn't coming from any position of opinion or anything like that. It is going to solely be me dropping some science, some insight, some evidence-based responses to these questions. And I'd be willing to bet my bag of peanut butter cups, my Super Saiyan 3 Goku pop vinyl figure, I'd be willing to bet anything that you probably will be struggling or have thought to yourself, well, basically like any of these, or at least one of these 10 questions. So strap yourself in for my responses. Please, if you have any further questions around the stuff I'm going to be covering in these actual responses, keep the conversation going in the comments below. And hey, do me a favor, if you end up finding this video valuable, or if you got any sort of, well, entertainment slash, well, insights from it, give it a like, share it around, and that way the YouTube gods show it to more people who could benefit from the content. So yeah, I'm ready to give my responses. I haven't rehearsed any of this. This is just going to be me. I've literally got my full list here. We're going to be hitting these one by one. So let's get it, fam. So first up we have, do I need to calorie count and track everything to lose weight? So that kind of depends in terms of my answer to that. So I personally believe that if someone doesn't have any education around thermodynamics, around how energy balance works in terms of energy in versus energy out, and hasn't had any sort of like decent length of time, like I'm talking 3 to 6 months or so, if they haven't had at least 3 to 6 months of understanding those things and learning how calories and energy works and learning how macronutrients works, and all they know is how to eat healthy, well, I personally don't believe that anyone can achieve their genetic, aesthetic and health potential through just trying to eat nutrient dense foods. So in other words, if someone can start their journey learning how to eat more protein, more plants and stuff like that, and do that for a period of time while encompassing more movement and stuff like that, well, that's an awesome start to the journey. Then they should focus on learning the components of flexible dieting, which falls under those sort of categories I just said just before. Maybe do that for a period of time, weighing food, learning kind of education around how to create meals and stuff like that, and then it's quite easy to be able to transition out of tracking and taking everything you learned into more sort of intuitive eating based principles as you continue to lose weight or maintain what you achieved. So I personally don't feel that someone needs to calorie count and whatever and all that sort of stuff ongoing. Like, you can definitely do it for a hunk of time when you're keen to dial in and just really sort of yeah, like, because in other words, it enables you to have really great control over yeah, like your food choices, and make sure you're obviously giving in your body sufficient protein, sufficient calories, all that sort of stuff. But if someone doesn't learn this sort of stuff, I personally don't feel they're going to be able to achieve their potential. Now let's see, second one, my scale weight keeps fluctuating, how do I keep losing weight? So if you're someone who, say for example, like weighs yourself once in a blue moon, and you invest your heart and soul into basically just like, oh wow, like the scale has gone up, fuck, like I'm such a bad person, that means I'm not eating like good enough, I'm just gonna drop my calories hard, whatever. Like, this is one of the worst things that you can possibly be doing, seriously. Like, if I were you, like, the scale is important, but obviously keep in mind that it's like, it's just telling you the force of gravity against your body. In no way does it define who you are. So in other words, don't be super anal about just trying to hit a goal weight, because I'll tell you what, like, I've had people that have basically, like, I've seen them and they hit their goal weight, but they still look shit, right? And that's because they've basically just been under eating so much, they've been grinding, doing heaps of cardio, and in other words, they haven't really been able to control their aesthetics properly, and that's because there's a big difference between weight loss and fat loss, right? Now, in terms of like fluctuations and stuff like that, like, what will happen basically is that if you weigh yourself, say for example, let's say 5 times a week, right? What you're going to notice is that in terms of the data that you're seeing, your weight is probably going to be going right? And then in the following week it will probably do similar. But what will happen is that when you're looking for fat loss, right, in terms of the data, you'll notice that it's going to be fairly linear in terms of the trend that it's going. And then obviously what you can do is you can compare averages in terms of where your scale weight is at from week to week. And then obviously, let's say for example for 2 to 3 weeks that you're gaining weight despite eating in a deficit, well then chances are that there's some errors in your tracking, or chances are that your intake is too low, or do you see what I mean? And like, it actually allows you some room to be able to make an educated decision, rather than just like, fuck, your weight went up once, like, you know, and just making some rational decisions. So you can still continue to lose weight, like even when I'm, you know, dieting and trying to lean down and stuff like that, like my weight is still volatile as well, because there's a shitload of stuff that influences your scale weight, like the time of the, you know, the weigh in, how much salt you had the day before, how much water you had the day before, how much sleep you had the day before, when your last meal was, like there's so much stuff that comes into play. But where you can be uniform is just how often you weigh yourself, and then comparing averages from week to week. Now, next one is, do I need to eat back the calories burned in exercise? So in other words, if you're using MyFitnessPal, right, you'll notice that obviously you set into the corner, you'll set your amount of calories that you're desiring to eat, and then let's say for example that's 1800, right? And if you haven't adjusted your settings properly, what you'll notice, right, is that basically if you are tracking all your food and then MyFitnessPal is linking the exercise that you're doing, what it might say is that from your workout that you did, you know, 400 calories worth of effort or whatever, so what will happen in the exercise, it says plus 400, and therefore you might have eaten 1800 calories, but it will still tell you that you've got all these extra calories left over, right? So if I were you, what I would actually be doing, right, is adjusting the settings on MyFitnessPal to not track your exercise, right? Yes, you can be using a Fitbit and stuff like that to be able to know how many calories you're burning and stuff like that, and your Fitbit should tell you your overall energy expenditure, and this is something that you should take into account so that you know your perceived maintenance and therefore how much of a deficit you need to put yourself in, whether it be 10 or 20%, say for example. And then when it comes to MyFitnessPal, like, you don't need to be eating extra, so it's like when you work out your intake calories anyway, you're taking into account all the exercise and the lifestyle factors that you go through on a week to week anyway. All right. Now, next question, number 5. So this is number 4. So how many calories do I need to eat while breastfeeding? So my approach personally, in terms of how I go about this, is like, so someone's obviously gone through the full birthing a human process, yay, and now they're breastfeeding. What I'll actually get someone to do is basically like, I'd be very careful in terms of like how much of a deficit I put them in the lead up. So in other words, the extent of it might only be 10%, if any. Like I usually prefer to put the person into maintenance and then track progression, track how the hormones and stuff are going, track the development of the baby. Like, you need to be really careful. And then when it comes to actually breastfeeding, maybe even up to a 10% surplus, because the focus definitely shouldn't be on fat loss when you're fresh out of producing a baby. Yeah, you can start exercising and walking and stuff like that, and gradually introducing weight training and all that sort of stuff, but it's when people dive straight into a deficit way too quickly and restriction and that sort of thing, and that can fuck up milk supply, it can fuck up your hormones, it can, yeah, just do a whole lot of damage, which isn't ideal at all. When it comes to like breastfeeding, a lot of people are just like, or even just when you're kind of like going through the processes of building the baby internally, right? Like, I know a lot of women who are just like, right, like I'm eating for 2, that's an excuse to be able to eat all the foods and just go nuts. Like, yeah, you could do that, but just be aware that because you're likely going to be in quite a surplus of energy, you will more than likely gain quite a lot of fat, right? And yes, obviously gaining some fat during pregnancy is natural, right? But if you are, you know, smart and kind of well logistical around food choices in terms of ensuring that you're still getting lots of quality food while also monitoring calories, there's no reason why you should be gaining excess amounts of fat. And then naturally, because you did it in a healthy way, when it comes to actually, well, yep, you produce the baby, you know, and the bun is out of the oven, as the saying goes, right? If you're still on point while eating in maintenance, or maybe even just very, very slightly below TDE, you should be fine in terms of being able to consistently still produce milk and be able to start leaning down without actually having to dive much into a deficit. So next one is, should I exercise when I'm feeling sick? Now, what I usually do in terms of when like a client is telling me that they're feeling sick or they're starting to notice signs of, you know, like, yeah, just whatever sickness, because obviously there's different types of sickness, right? I always ask them on a scale of 1 to 10, how are you feeling in terms of the severity of pain or the sickness? So in other words, if it's like a 7, or above, I tell them don't train. I tell them instead to just focus on recovery. We get them eating at maintenance for a few days, and then assess from there. Because really, in essence, like, yeah, you could do the whole no pain, no gain sort of stuff and just, you know, still go and do a session and sweat it out type shit. But what you'll usually find, right, is when you're sick, your body's going to be under some sort of stress, right? Obviously there's some sort of physical stress going on, right? So for you to then go and grind with some training, what you're kind of doing there is, well, when you're training, understand that you're providing some stress upon your nervous system, upon your cardiovascular sort of system. You're obviously wearing and tearing muscle fibers, so therefore that's a stress too. So you got all this stress going on, plus the stress of you being sick and your body trying to recover from it. And then, do you sort of mean? So it's like, you got to kind of think in the grand scheme of things, like if you're not training for a few days just to recover from being sick, is it going to make or break your progress? No. Like, fair enough if you're, you know, like 8 weeks out from a comp or whatever and you're trying to be really smart about your decisions, well, I can understand. But obviously, like, I'm sure that you're tuning in, you're a Gen Pop type person, like you just want to look great naked and you know, have a good relationship with food. Like, I wouldn't stress it. That's how I approach things as well. And because my health is so, you know, on point because of how, you know, flexible I am with my eating and how great I am with my biomarkers, it means that I get sick once in a blue moon. Seriously, like, I think I got sick once this year so far, and it's almost the end of September, right? So that's what I'd do if I was you. Now, next question. What's more important for weight loss, food quality or quantity? This is a really good question because when it comes to like what I personally believe in terms of creating a successful transformation and something that's sustainable, I personally believe that it needs to be a good balance between the two. So in other words, let's say that someone is all about flexible dieting, they're like, fuck yeah, let's track macros and calories and I'll just eat whatever the fuck I want. You know, and like they've got their targets and they're focusing on hitting calories and, you know, they're eating whatever, right? And yes, from a thermodynamics point of view, they're nailing it, right? Fuck yeah, cool. Like, energy in versus energy out is the main contributing factor to controlling aesthetic change and body recomposition, right? But understand that when someone is like hitting targets like that, but then their quality of food choices are so shit and the bulk of what they're eating is just refined processed food, well, naturally they're going to feel horrendous. They're going to feel lethargic, they're going to feel run down, they're going to struggle to perform in the gym, and naturally, because there's such a low amount of nutrients in the system, they're going to start getting sick, likely lose some muscle, and it's not a good time. But then on the other side of things, if someone has no concept of food quantity and all they know or all they focus on is basically just quality of food and trying to eat #clean and make sure that everything's organic and this sort of shit, right? Like, they're also not going to be able to achieve their aesthetic potential because they've got no kind of focus on calories and energy in versus energy out, and therefore it's kind of like a catch-22. So my personal opinion is, like, for someone to be able to create awesome aesthetics, they need to be healthy. And for someone to be healthy, you need to give a shit about the quality of the food that you're putting into your system. So it should be an even balance between the two, or kind of like, you know, the Venn diagram scenario where you've got some circles, like these two are both interlinked, right? So it's like a circle and a circle, and that little bit in between, right? That's kind of like the sweet spot in terms of what's going to allow someone to control how they feel, how they function, and naturally will create a more sustainable means of adhering to whatever they're doing so they can keep doing it ongoing. So I don't think one is more important than the other, but I guess it kind of comes down to the person's goals and how much of a likelihood they want to set themselves up for sustainable success and, you know, like setting themselves up for food enjoyment. Because there are some people who just don't really mind if they're eating rigid shit and don't even mind if they're just eating the same stuff all the time and, you know, whatever. So but then there are those who just really need so much variety and don't even care about how they look. They just want to be healthy. So it kind of comes down to context of the person's goals. Let's see. So next question: how do I conquer food cravings? So this is an interesting one, right? I've personally found that with my experience in the game of, you know, coaching men and women across the world for many years now, that those who have the greatest success with just being homies with food and not kind of having it on their mind all the time, and, you know, like those who will be able to trust themselves with having any sort of food in the cupboard, whether it be chocolate or ice cream or, you know, chips, whatever it might be, right? Like, those who have just a really rock solid consistency with food, right, are those who know how to like work with their body rather than against it. So if you're consistently trying to work against your body's survival instincts and trying to keep you in a state of homeostasis, what you're going to find is that if you consistently try and grind against what your body tells you it wants, but then what's more likely going to happen, right, is that basically you will, as soon as those foods that you tell yourself you can't have cross your paths, you are likely going to YOLO fucking hard on those things because, well, like you've abstained from it, and obviously that food brings you so much pleasure, and naturally what happens is this builds a bit of a fear around those foods. You obviously cement gradually more and more a belief that you can't trust yourself around that food, and therefore, well, the novelty of that food also increases, but you tell yourself a story that you can't trust yourself around it, right? So what I actually get my clients to do personally, this is something that I've lived and breathed for many years now, is I actually get them to either tackle it from a couple of different angles. Angle one is, let's say that your intake is 1800, right? You might devote 20% of your calories every day to typical YOLO stuff that you used to, binge on, right? So let's say that in that sort of scenario, 20% would be 180, 360 calories, right? So 360 calories daily. You might isolate to some chocolate to, just insert whatever it is, and then the remaining calories can go to things like nutrient dense stuff that's going to allow you to get insufficient protein and fiber, aka macronutrients, that will serve you, and then, well, vitamins and minerals, right? So that's angle one. Or angle two is just like, well, consciously eat each day, just eat to your calories, eat to your targets, but then whenever your body is telling you that it wants something specifically, roll with it, go with it, because that's your body literally telling you that it wants something, right? It's when people try and work against it and outsmart it and just, try and just intentionally fast when you're actually hungry and just unnecessarily do stuff. That's when things can really start to get kind of a bit iffy, and where if you're not careful, eating disorders can be built similar to what I shared just before. So I wouldn't be, if I were you, trying to focus on conquering food cravings, but rather learning how to work with them with a strategic approach that will serve you ongoing, similar to what I just said. So we got a few more left. We are up to number 8. How do I stay on track when traveling and eating out? So for the typical conventional dieter, I'm well and truly aware that when it comes to social eating and when it comes to parties and when it comes to traveling and stuff like that, that it's a very hard time, because naturally, well, with all of your normal sort of routine, you're used to eating certain foods, you're used to just, your own sort of little bubble, right? So when you're obviously in these different scenarios, this freaks you out because you don't actually really kind of know how to handle them, right? Whereas for example, if you're a flexible dieter, right, and you just literally fucking eat whatever in terms of a wide variety of foods to be able to meet your personal targets, to get in enough protein, to get in enough fiber and stuff like that, well, your kind of scenario here then is that, irrespective of whether you're at home or if you're at a takeaway joint or if you're traveling or whatever, essentially, right, what's the scenario is that you still every single day are in control of your choices and actions in terms of what you choose to eat, when you choose to eat it, that will meet your personal targets. In other words, let's say that you're at home and your macronutrient split is 50 fat, 120 carbs, and maybe 140 protein, right, with 30 grams of fiber. You obviously each day make food choices to be able to meet those targets, right? So naturally when you're away, it's just the only difference is that you're kind of got different food available, right? But the same targets still apply. Or if you want to be a bit loose in yourself, you might just focus on calories, where it's cool, I don't give a shit about my macros while I'm away. I'm just going to focus on, enjoying what's available and hitting my targets in terms of calories, and that way it's a bit easier to accommodate, and Bob's your uncle, right? So, and then another tip is when you're traveling, if I were you, especially if you've been cutting prior, so in other words, if you've been in a deficit for 5 to 10 weeks prior, if I were you, if you're away for 1 to 2 weeks, just eat at maintenance, because trying to focus on fat loss while traveling, yeah, you can do it. It's not really too difficult. I've done it many times before. But let's just say that things are much more enjoyable when you've got more calories up your sleeve, because that's going to allow you more flexibility to be able to have some more fun foods and eat some more higher calorie foods as well, which is usually what happens when we, are traveling, right? And then when it comes to eating out, it's just a means of literally planning ahead. That's one of your best bets in terms of if you know that you're going to be going out for tea and it's only the morning, well, planning ahead, look at the menu of the joint, look at their Facebook, decide what it is that you want to eat, It might be like a burger and chips, it might be a palmy, it might be a nice, pumpkin pesto pizza. Like, just plan ahead what you want, enter it into MyFitnessPal, and if I were you, just work backwards. So let's say, for example, that the meal out that you're going to have is going to be 900 calories and it's only got 40 grams of protein, but then your targets are maybe 1800, so that means you've got 900 calories to kind of #live on through the rest of the day in the lead up. And because your meal only has 50 grams of protein and your target might be 130, that means you've got to think, right, okay, cool, how can I get roughly 80 grams of protein out of this 900 calories, and then fill in the rest with whatever. Drink lots of water, you see what I mean? And then let's say, for example, that you are going to a buffet maybe, right? And you want to use all your calories in one feed, well, then that's cool. Like, let's say, for example, that it's dinner. Your only scenario here is that you're going to have to fast during the day and keep your mind occupied so it's not focused on food. And then, hey, you would just guesstimate roughly what you're eating and what's going on, being conscious of whether it's nutrient dense or not, approaching it in a 70-30 sort of scenario. And then, use all your calories in one meal. Like, there's nothing wrong with that either. Because the idea of, like, this sort of way of living being flexible is that it caters for these sort of things, because you're building your results off of not being rigid with a very certain small amount of foods that you're eating, but rather where you're building your results from is learning how to make choices in different scenarios, so that way you're building a stronger relationship with food, as well as knowing how to handle situations that would typically break a conventional dieter. Hope that makes sense. Now, next one is, do I need to cut out carbs to lose weight? Short answer to that is no. The hierarchy of what's going to allow you to drop body fat is you consuming less calories than what your body requires to maintain your current weight, right? And then obviously where conventional dieting kicks in is that any sort of diet that you do, whether it be keto, Atkins, I quit sugar, clean eating, fucking whatever it is, right? Understand that all of them are just varying ways of putting you into a calorie deficit. That's the way that they work. You're cutting out or you're eating less of something, which is going to naturally overall put you into a deficit of energy, right? So obviously everyone, based on their starting point, like let's say for example that you're obese, like very obese, and you don't do any sort of decent amount of energy expenditure, but then because with your energy sources, like in terms of like how your body uses energy, because you're not going to be actually moving around much and stuff like that, your body's not going to have much need for carbs. So therefore, like, ketogenic principles could be a benefit to you. Or if you've got epilepsy or whatever, same sort of deal. But if you're an average Gen Pop person who is quite active and you lift 3 to 5 times a week and you go for walks and shit like that, is it necessary for you to cut out carbs to lose fat? Absolutely not. There's no reason why you can't be having 200 grams of carbs a day while hitting your deficit target and then grinding along and be dropping body fat. Like, even for me with my recent comp prep earlier on in the year, even in my final weeks of prep, I was still eating around 300 grams of carbs, right? So some bit of an insight for you. Understand there's no such thing as good or bad foods. There's just such a bad thing. So the only thing that's kind of bad is just, well, good and bad quantities, right? Because it's when people just blow things out of proportion and go YOLO hard on certain things, and then deprivation on the other. I'm more of an approach of moderation across the board rather than deprivation to any capacity. And then last question is, does my metabolism get worse as I get older? So what's interesting to know about your metabolism, right, is that it's something that works for you in sync with your lifestyle choices ongoing for all of your life. So in other words, it's never going to be permanently low or permanently high or just whatever. It's consistently adaptive. So what this means is that, well, like if you're in your 30s and 40s, right, and you're deciding to get your shit together, but then when you were younger, you were a complete YOLO person who did no sort of activity and just ate all the food in existence, right? Well, truth be told, that if you are obviously being consistent with your new lifestyle choices, your metabolism can actually start to improve and perform optimally, right? And if you can maintain that, right, ongoing, there's no reason why your metabolism should get slower in terms of its functionality as you age. I've had clients that I've worked with that have been in their 50s and stuff like that, that we've gotten their metabolism and just their aesthetics and stuff like that to look better than what they were when they were actually in their 20s. So understand that it's like, you can never fuck your metabolism, right? It's forever adaptive, right? So in other words, it will consistently adapt to your lifestyle choices. So you just want to have consistency in whatever you're doing. Obviously, if you're consistently making shit lifestyle related choices, your metabolism is going to reflect that, and usually so will your weight. Whereas if you are just, healthy and moving along and going strong into your 50s, 60s, 70s, there's no reason why you can't be lean, happy, and healthy at an age like that. And examples of that are people that are fucking shredded and looking amazing, competing in, bodybuilding and stuff like that at that age. And, these sort of people that you see in the news that are lean, happy, and healthy at 80 and 90, like, it is possible. It's just a means of, your choices and actions dictate everything. There we go, fam. The 10 questions in terms of, the most frequently asked fat loss and weight loss questions have been answered. Really hope you enjoyed those insights from me. I definitely know that if I was, a YOLO kind of rookie person cruising along in the game and, who didn't know much, and if I came across a video like that, that would have been super valuable for me. So, in terms of with where you're at in the game, obviously I'm not sure if you're someone who, as a result of seeing all this, kind of feels a bit ski-whiffed in terms of just like your certainty in terms of whether what you're doing is right. If I were you, just scroll below, check out in the description of this video, you're going to see a couple of links. The main one that I want you to check out is going to take you to my online store, and this one is going to give you all sorts of different free stuff you can check out to help you on your journey, as well as info into coaching if you feel that you could benefit from having someone like me sharing the journey with you to be able to make things easier so that you don't make the same mistakes that so many others make that cause people to fail the journey, that cause people to just develop just horrendous relationships with food, that cause people to fall off the wagon and all this sort of stuff. Food should be something that you look forward to eating on all your main meals. Exercise should be a celebration, something that you look forward to, that invigorates you to slay the rest of your day. 2 out of 3 adults at the moment are overweight. 1 out of 3 children are overweight. Yes, a lot of this shit in terms of what you should be doing and stuff, you can access for free online, but more often than not, I find it's not information that people need. It's information to an extent, but more so it's just being guided in terms of making the right choices and actions so that you can be building discipline and just education around the right stuff to free yourself from the whole of the system. Obviously, yes, there's things like the National Dietary Guidelines and stuff that can be helping you in terms of parameters around what you should be eating and how much, but please do me a favor, if you found this video valuable, give it a like and share it with someone who could benefit from watching this content. If you're a returning subscriber, make sure you go and check out some other knowledge bomb loaded videos or some other eating videos and stuff like that. All you're gonna do is just scroll into the upload section. You got a whole heap of cool shit you can choose from. And obviously, if you're new to the channel and you like this video, I would highly suggest that you subscribe. Follow me on social media, check some more about what I'm about, and definitely follow in my journey, because I love helping people to master the art that is basically loving food, controlling their aesthetics, looking great naked, fucking loving themselves, and just living their best life. So thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time in the YouTube world. Peace out.